it gives me some broad idea about where you're coming from. I'd like to say that I hope that the things we're going to be looking at over these 2 days will be applicable to a wide variety of different client groups and a wide variety of problems. Obviously, there'll be some elements within this which will be more applicable to certain client groups than to others, and to certain problems than others, but it should be applicable across the board. If there are instances where we're going through things and you're thinking to yourself, I just really do not see how this actually applies to the folk I'm actually working with, please do say, so that I can look at how we can adapt that and use it with the folks that you're working with. Because what I hope is going to be the case, as I hope you will feel as well, is that you go away with something practical that you can actually use and put into effect. Now, as you're aware, these 2 days are part of a BPS-approved certificate in resource-based therapies. So it consists of these 2 days, which also obviously operate as a standalone course, a 2-day course on solution-focused therapy, and a 1-day course on positive therapy, which is the therapeutic applications of positive psychology. And I just really wanted to start the day off by opening up a little bit about what that certificate's about, what links these 3 approaches together, and also say a little bit about why we put it together in the first place. So to varying degrees, these 3 approaches have certain linking elements to them. I think particularly with regards to what we're going to look at today and tomorrow, there is some degree of variation on this, which I'll open up now, but they all to varying degrees have these linking themes. So all of these approaches are interested in where people are going to, not primarily where they've come from. So for that particular reason, they're very future-oriented. I should just add a caveat with regards to what we're going to be looking at these 2 days about this, which will hopefully become clearer as the day progresses. But it's probably fair to say that not in all, but in a large number of instances, when we're trying to motivate our clients in many instances will be initially more motivated by what they want to get away from than what it is they wish to move to. Now, that's not always the case, but I think that you'll find that when you ask your clients about that, they are more commonly likely to say, I want to get away from something. And in that respect, they are probably more past-oriented initially in terms of their motivation than future-oriented. But one thing I would emphasize is that with regards to maintaining motivation and maintaining change, being future-oriented is absolutely essential for reasons that we'll come back to later on. If you continue to really primarily focus on what it is that you want to get away from, then there are, as I hope we're going to see later on, some real dangers of relapse actually occurring. So I still think that future orientation is absolutely central to what we're looking at over these 2 days. It's just, it may be, not in all instances, but it may be slightly more delayed when we're looking at the question of motivation. Secondly, all of these approaches are strengths-oriented. They're all primarily interested in what the client has already got, which enables them to move forward. So this comes through in a number of ways in what we're going to be looking at over these 2 days. For example, Rolnick and Miller say that all clients are intrinsically motivated to change. Now, I know that for some of you that will sound either naively idealistic or totally and utterly off the wall, but I hope it will become clearer as the 2 days progress. In other words, you haven't got to create motivation. It's not like the person is unmotivated and you've got to give them something to make them motivated. The idea behind this is that the client is already motivated, but our role is to identify what that is, to elicit it, to bring it out and to amplify it, rather than to create it from scratch. But this is the exact opposite of what would typically be called a deficits model. And a deficits model, which I'm sure you're going to be very familiar with because we're all trained in a deficits model, is basically to assess and identify deficits that people have, and then to actually use that as the basis for the work that we actually do. So we see ourselves very often in the repair business of taking something that people lack and looking at how we can repair it. Now, all of these approaches really are not interested in that. They're much more interested in what the client's got going for them and how they can use that to move themselves forward. All of these approaches have an aversion to negative typologies or negative classification systems, and that also applies to this particular approach that we're going to be looking at over the 2 days. In a sense, things like diagnostic labeling are seen as totally and utterly irrelevant. So it's not seen as essential to even really, I would say, probably even name what the problem is, let alone to classify it in any particular way. So that obviously has some interesting implications for all of these approaches, to be honest, over the question of assessment. And certainly there is minimal interest in all of these approaches in assessment, and particularly assessment with regards to deficit in some way. All of these are interested in positive and active goals and outcomes, and you might say, well, that's great because I'm interested in positive and active goals and outcomes, but actually frequently we're not, and certainly I would suggest our clients aren't. Our clients, if they are interested in an outcome, are frequently interested in an outcome which is commonly termed a negative outcome, which is the absence of the problem. So if you would say to people, how would you like things to be different, they would say to us, I'd like not to get into trouble, I'd like not to be using drugs, I'd like not to be depressed, I'd like not to be falling out with my teacher. In other words, these are goals which are about the negative presence of something rather than the active presence of what the person will be doing instead. And all of these approaches, again to varying degrees, focus quite substantially on the idea of having a positive and active goals and outcomes. And they're all non-problem and non-pathology based. Now, again, this varies according to which of the 3 modules we're talking about, but in connection with the issue of motivation that we're going to be looking at over these 2 particular days, it is not crucial that the client identifies themselves as having a problem which you think they've got. So, for example, if for instance, I think that my client has got a problem with drinking, but actually they don't think they have, all of these approaches do not see it as being useful to sweat blood over trying to get the client to own up to, take responsibility for, grasp the problem. The same with changing health behaviours. There is no requirement for the individual to actually see themselves as having a problem in the way in which we define it. Now, I know that's all going to sound a bit weird at this particular point in time, and hopefully it will become clearer as the 2 days move on. But I think one of the big pluses with this is that it helps to bypass one of the biggest obstacles that's often around when we're motivating people, which is that they have a radically different view of what's going on to the view that we actually have. And that we invest quite frequently a lot of energy into trying to help our clients to have the same view of things as we do. We call this helping them to gain insight. And as a result of that, we actually find that the whole progress of things moving forward is often much trickier. So all of these approaches, to varying degrees, bypass that particular issue. Now? Why do we put all of these things together now?